My name is Jeff Parnes. I am a proud American. I am a New Yorker from the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and as of yesterday, I am a coronavirus refugee. This is a personal statement and is not endorsed by the organization I run, our board, staff, supporters, partners, or volunteers. These are my own words as a fellow American. I am making this video for 3 reasons. First, I want to explain to you why my family and I had to flee New York City yesterday and what is actually going on there. Second, I want to share with you what I believe all Americans must do to come together to defeat this virus. And finally, at the end of this video, I have a direct message for my president, President Trump, and a historical constitutional idea for our president to consider that could potentially save the lives of Americans and go down in history as the single greatest act of presidential leadership ever. First, let me explain to you why my family and I had to leave Manhattan. We live on the Upper West Side in a 35-story apartment building. There are 330 other homes in our building with 1,000 residents. For the last 3 weeks, we've been wearing gloves, wearing masks, using hand sanitizers, washing our hands with soap after touching anything that anybody else might have touched. Over the last week or two, we found out that more people in our building were coming down with the virus and were living in the building. As hard as we work to try to protect ourselves and mitigate the risk, the scary thing about this virus and how contagious it is it lives in the air for up to 3 hours. So every time we left our apartment to take the garbage out or go to the elevator, an elevator that we share with 1,000 other people going to the same lobby, we were walking through the air that somebody could have coughed in 3 hours earlier. As we found out that more residents were getting sick and leaving, we realized we have to consider going. On Tuesday, Governor Cuomo gave an extraordinary press conference, and he just gave the data. New York State, New York City is beginning to realize that this surge of cases will come sooner and bigger than originally predicted. In New York State and New York City does not have the capacity to handle the surge. There are not enough ICU beds. There are not enough ventilators. And no matter what we do in between now and a few weeks from now, Governor Cuomo warned that it is very possible for the New York City hospital system to break down in its ability to provide critical care capacity in the next 21 days. We're doing everything we can to stay healthy. We're doing everything we can not to transmit the virus to everybody else. We're living in an apartment building where we share the air with 1,000 other people, 4 elevators and a little lobby exit. But when I heard that there might not be hospitals to care for us in case my wife and my son who was with me got sick, we realized it was time to go. As we were packing, I found out from our doorman almost 50% of the rest of the building, a 35-story apartment building, had already evacuated. Now let me share with you what I think every American must do to save lives of people in your own community as well as Americans across the country. When we were driving yesterday from New York City to Michigan, I made 2 stops at a gas station to fill up. When I got out, I put on my gloves. I made sure I inserted the credit card wearing my gloves. I picked up the handle of the nozzle wearing my gloves. In Ohio, there was a gentleman standing next to me filling up his tank on the other side of the bay without wearing gloves. I just kind of waved my hands, showed him my gloves, and he looked at me. That man touched a nozzle that 1,000 other people might have touched. This virus lives on plastic and metal surfaces for days. If he wasn't sick, but was a carrier, by not wearing those gloves, he might have passed it on to the next person. He might have passed it on to somebody who might not have the critical care capacity in the community where they live or they're going to. A dear friend of mine, Mike McBeath in Greensburg, Kansas, moved his entire 3D printing shop into the movie theater in Greensburg and has been churning out those visors with the personal protective equipment for nurses and doctors. I realized if people in a small town like Greensburg, Kansas do all the right things and don't get sick, then maybe the one extra ventilator in the hospital in a small town in Kansas can be sent to New York City that doesn't have enough capacity. And maybe if people in small towns all across America did the same thing, maybe an extra ventilator could be sent from all these other small towns and rural communities and smaller regions to the large cities where they cannot meet the surge of critical care equipment. And when New York gets past that curve, as Governor Cuomo explained, that ventilator will go back or will be sent in a rolling capacity way to the next place it's needed the most to save more Americans. So the simple thing that you do not only could protect your life and the life of your family and somebody else at the end of the line in your own community, but the choices that you make could potentially free up life-saving medical equipment in your small community that could ultimately be sent to places like New York that will not be able to handle the surge. They are already building temporary morgues in the streets of Manhattan outside the hospitals. Every American has to act. Finally, my personal message to President Trump. Mr. President, you and I share a good friend in common, Bill Zanker. Your son, Barron, went to the same school my son went to, Columbia Prep. You're from Queens, I'm from Brooklyn. We could talk about that. I also had the privilege of standing at the podium in the White House press briefing room when I served President Reagan in the White House Office of Public Liaison for Defense and Foreign Policy in 1986. After 9/11, I started an organization that became one of the largest disaster relief organizations in the nation to emerge from the tragedy. And I've had the privilege of rebuilding communities all across the United States following historic disasters. I know how important it is to get the logistics right in an ongoing and rolling disaster. And that is how this crisis will be defeated. By rolling capacity through mutual aid between governors and states to share ventilators and other critical life-saving equipment so that we could tamp down the surges and roll that capacity to the next hotspot and save more American lives quickly. Mr. President, it will take supply chain logistics expertise, governor-level bureaucratic management, and governor-to-governor collaboration to win this war at home and save American lives. So with my full respect, Mr. President, I would like to suggest an historic constitutional idea that only you could act on to immediately save hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of American lives. And here is the idea. Self-invoke the 25th Amendment temporarily. Self-invoke the 25th Amendment temporarily. By doing this, you alone can elevate former Indiana Governor Mike Pence to President of the United States until we defeat this crisis. He could work with the governors hand in hand to ensure there is 100% alignment, coordination, and mutual aid between states to ensure the rolling capacity meets the rolling waves of this virus that is about to devastate our nation. Every second we waste on petty personal politics, Americans die. Every second we waste on petty personal politics, Americans will die. By taking this historic and courageous action, you alone can enable Americans to do what we do best, help one another free from politics, just like we all did on 9/11, and just like we all did on 9/12. Mr. President, by elevating President Pence to lead our country through this critical surge of the virus, and by temporarily giving him full presidential authority and responsibility to deal with all the governors to ensure the successful rolling capacity of state-to-state mutual aid of life-saving equipment, you can free yourself to do what you love and do what you do best. Get out there on the front lines and rally the troops and entertain the troops as only you can with your unique passion and your genuine love for this country. Mr. President, this can go down in history as the single greatest selfless act of presidential leadership and management decisions in a global crisis ever. You alone can use the full power of the Constitution to single-handedly choose the one person in the chain of command with gubernatorial experience and expertise who is best suited to lead this nation through this life and death crisis that will be defeated by governor-to-governor collaboration. Sometimes the pilot has to give control to the co-pilot to land the plane. Like The Apprentice, you could elevate President Pence to help us cross the finish line. When it is over, you could regain control of the office of the presidency with the gratitude of hundreds of millions of Americans and people around the world who look to us and learn from us what leadership is all about. Mr. President, as a fellow New Yorker, I have to tell it to you straight. I'm not a fan of yours, but you are my president. If you self-invoke the 25th Amendment temporarily and let President Pence lead this country through this brief period, I will personally consider you a national hero. And so will hundreds of millions of other Americans. Governor Cuomo, you make me proud to be a New Yorker. Your calm, data-driven guidance is a true blessing to America. New Yorkers can help lead America out of this darkness just like Americans led New York out of the darkness of 9/11. Dr. Fauci, you make me proud to be from Brooklyn. And after this is over, hot dogs on me at Nathan's. Extra relish. Mr. President, if this problem continues to cascade, the loss of American lives will be hundreds of magnitudes worse than 9/11. Or we could all come together as Americans. You could take this historic act of presidential leadership, and this can be America's finest hour, just like we all were on 9/12. Mr. President, I pray for your health and that of your family. Vice President Pence, I pray for your health, the health of your family, and your continued stewardship of our country through this crisis. Mr. President, if you consider this historic suggestion and self-invoke the 25th Amendment temporarily, it will go down in American history as the single greatest presidential act of leadership, courage, and grace. God bless you. May God bless all my fellow Americans. And may God bless all the people around the world as we face this global health crisis together. We can do this.